Hello, YouTube, Mr. Max here. The world of Pokemon is full of a lot of fun and challenging trainers that you can fight throughout your journey. However, there are a lot of other characters that are very helpful to you that you don't ever end up actually battling. They might have some Pokemon that you know they have or they take care of, but you don't ever actually see them enter a battle. So I thought it would be fun if today I created full teams of six Pokemon for a bunch of these NPC characters. So sit back, relax, and watch my presentation of going over the teams I created for these NPCs. So here's my presentation going over the 15 NPC characters in Pokemon that I gave full teams of six to. Now, starting off here, are the criteria for how I built these teams. First off, I picked the Pokemon for these teams based on canon Pokemon these characters have based on appearances in the games, anime, manga, and other sources, as well as Pokemon that just generally fit their theme or personality. I prioritize Pokemon from the region of origin, so Pokemon that exist in the Pokedex they came from. So Pokemon was first introduced in Ruby and Sapphire. I prioritize Pokemon that are from the Ruby and Sapphire Pokedex. However, there are a couple of times when there is a Pokemon that just fits them so well that it did come from later, and I made an exception there, but I'll kind of go over that on a case-by-case basis. These teams were created independent of canon trainer teams as well as independent from each other. So for the first one, for example, there was a trainer from Generation 1 that I really wanted to give him a Dragonite, but at first I was like, oh, well, that's Lance's Pokemon, so maybe he should have something else. But then I decided, no, Dragonite really fits here. I'm not going to care about um, any overlap with any canon teams. These will all be considered theoretical post-game fights, so team overlap doesn't really matter as much. And also independent of each other. Like, for example, you'll see a Pokemon like Rhydon appear quite often just because a lot of these do come from Generation 1, um, or uh, or or Generation 1 or 2, and because Generation 1 Pokemon have just been around for so long, those Pokemon will appear more often. And if the Pokemon just fit them very well, I wasn't gonna really care if this Pokemon appeared super often. I cared more about does it fit the trainer itself, even if that Pokemon is used very often. And lastly, team strength and synergy was not really a factor when creating these teams. For example, I just mentioned Rhydon. If it really makes sense for the team to be full of a bunch of rock and ground types, that's not really, I didn't really care that much if the team was created for like competitive battling. And some of these teams are definitely better than others. Actually think a lot of these teams do synergize very well, but some do have Pokemon that you wouldn't necessarily consider great, but it fit them so well that I just felt like they needed to be on there. Okay, so let's jump right into it with the first one I created being Nurse Joy. So Nurse Joy, I specifically created her team um, based on the couple of very obvious ones, but also I specifically created her team based on Pokemon that knew a bunch of moves and had abilities that incorporated healing elements like Heal Bell, Aromatherapy, Heal Pulse, abilities like Regenerator or Healer, that kind of thing. Now she obviously appears very often in the anime, and like I said before, I made a lot of these teams based on anime and manga and in-game appearances, but every time since she's so prevalent, she's one of those characters that they would just kind of give the Pokemon of the week. Like she had a Vanillite. I don't really think she should have a Vanillux, whatever. So I specifically for her, I went more with Pokemon that fit her theme. So we have Alomomola. It has the ability Regenerator. It has moves like Wish. I think it can learn Heal Pulse. I'm not exactly sure about that, but it definitely its whole thing is healing itself and others. Same exact thing with Comfey. Its ability is literally triage, which makes sense for our nurse Pokemon. It can learn aromatherapy, and pretty much every other healing move outside of like soft boil. That might be the only one it can't learn. But yeah, its whole thing is healing, and also I wanted to represent that Nurse Joy do also exist in the Alola region. Aromatisse, even though I really do not like the design of this thing, its Pokedex entries do mention its healing aroma. It can learn a bunch of these kind of moves like Wish and Aromatherapy. Um, Indeedee, two things about this. One, I like its Pokedex entry mentioning that it psychically releases these like emotions that like make other Pokemon and people just feel happier. And I feel that really could help with, with like anesthesia and other just general day-to-day help at a Pokemon Center. And also in the Sword and Shield games, there is an Indeedee in every Pokemon Center. It's not really with her, it's with the guy that does like the name rating and move remembering, but there is still one within her vicinity, so I feel like it, for all those reasons, it fits here. And I wanted Audino to be here, but I also went ahead and did Mega Audino. Not every trainer will have a Mega or Gigantamax Pokemon, but if I felt like if that form fit them very well, then I would put it on here. Um, Audino or Mega Audino would both fit very well. Regular Audino has the ability Regenerator, whereas Mega Audino has Healer. Um, Either could work, but I really wanted her to have Mega just to represent the fact that she is uh, prevalent in Kalos as well. And I don't know, I just really liked the idea of her having a Mega. And then obviously Blissey, Chansey has been her Pokemon throughout her entire time being a character. And I felt it would be a logical next step for her to have a Blissey on her team as her ace. Next up, the gym guide. This one was fun. This is another one like Nurse Joy, where they're prevalent in pretty much every single Pokemon game. I guess the only one they're not is Sun and Moon, since there were no gyms. Um, and when crafting this team, I was I relied heavier on the Bulbapedia page to kind of get ideas for this. And the Bulbapedia page essentially laid out the fact that the judges from the anime, like in the picture here, they're kind of supposed to be the same character as the gym guide. And just to clarify, the gym guide I'm referring to is the guy that when you enter the gym, he's the first guy there standing next to the that statue in the Gen 5 games. He gives you fresh water. He's just the first face you see when you enter a gym. So I went with Pokemon that he used in the anime, as well as some kind of more abstract things that like I felt made sense, and I'll go over those in just a second. So this I think was probably the most fun one that I created. So first, Rhydon. The little statues he stands next to in especially the Gen 1 Pokemon games are essentially supposed to be modeled after the little sprite for Rhydon, so I figured he would have a Rhydon. Scizor, I was very proud of. His there is a TCG card for the gym guide, or maybe the gym judge. Like it's whatever this character is. And his what he does in the card is essentially something to the tune of when you play him, both players play rock, paper, scissors, and then the winner either draws a card or something happens. So I thought it'd be fun if he had a scissor to represent throwing scissors and rock, paper, scissors. That's definitely the most abstract one, but also since he is prevalent in every single generation, I wanted him to have some Generation 2 Pokemon. So Scizor. Simipour, as previously mentioned, he gives out fresh water in every single gym in Generation 5. So I wanted him to have a Generation 2 Pokemon. Similar to Aromatisse, I don't really like Simipour's design all that much, but I think it does fit here. Aegislash, the most prevalent picture I could find of him from the anime is him riding that Aegislash, so why not him have an Aegislash? Gyarados, this is a fun one because in Generation 1, for some ridiculous reason, the tiles that that are the little Rhydon statues, for some reason you can fish on those tiles. You can only ever fish up Magikarp, but regardless, he stands next to those statues all day, so I think it only makes sense when he gets bored that he would fish up at least one Magikarp in in his time doing this job. So he has a Gyarados. And Machamp, his most consistent line of dialogue is, "Hey, champ of the making." So Machamp. It just fits him very well. It's also just a very powerful Pokemon that I don't know. It makes sense that someone who is essentially, works for the Pokemon League would have one, but also I just really like his, champ of the making, Machamp. I think that's fun. Next up, Bill. So Bill, both in the games and manga, it's said at some point that he owns an Abra. So I think it makes sense for him to eventually evolve that into an Alakazam. On top of it, just makes sense for a scientist character to have a smart Pokemon like Alakazam. Nidoking and Clefable, they're the fully evolved Pokemon of the Pokemon that he essentially like fused with when you first get to his cottage in Red and Blue. In the older games, it's the model of a Clefairy. In Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, it's a Nidorino. So those fully evolved forms. For Dragonite, it's mentioned both in the anime and manga that it's his goal in life to study very rare Pokemon like Dragonite, specifically Dragonite. So I thought it would be fun if he eventually caught one and put on his team. Venusaur, he has one in the manga, and also I don't know, he just feels like a kind of trainer that Professor Oak would like and give a starter to. And then Umbreon, I wanted him to have an evolution since he gives you the EV in the Gen 2 games. And since his main home is in Goldenrod, I wanted it to be one of the two Gen 2 evolutions, and I feel like Umbreon fit best here. Mr. Fuji. Um, this one, I actually had a lot more options than I thought I would. I thought I would need to be more creative here, but as you can see, there's already five options here, and then there's like four or five other options that he either takes care of or previously owned or whatever that are either just chilling in his house in Lavender Town or someone mentioned that he owned it at one point. So I had a lot of options here. So I went with Golduck. He he is said to have owned a Golduck at one point. Nidoking, same thing with a Nidorino. There's actually a Nidorino walking around in his shop or in his house. Politoed, the evolved form of this Poliwag here in that art there. Beedrill and Pidgeotto, or sorry, Pidgeot. Um, there's evolved form of a Weedle and a Pidgey that he's also known to have cared for in the past. And Marowak, the evolved form of the baby Cubone that lost his mom in that plot line in the Pokemon Tower. Now, for Politoed here, this does bring up a point I want to say here. For trainers like Mr. Fuji and other trainers that kind of exist that obviously exist in Generation 2 because Kanto is also in the Johto games. Um, I allowed Pokemon that have branched evolutions to potentially go one way or the other. Now, there are certain instances where someone like a Rhydon, I just didn't feel like it made sense for it to evolve all the way. And sometimes I felt like it could, and I'll touch on those in a case-by-case basis, but more often than not, especially if it's a Gen 1 trainer, it's only gonna be able to evolve up to however high it could in Generation 1. But again, I'll touch on those more later. But for Mr. Fuji, I felt it made sense for him to have a Politoed because mostly um, I felt like Poliwrath didn't really fit his aesthetic, whereas Politoed does. The fan club chairman. This one was a lot of fun. Another one that I didn't think would have a lot of source material to go off of. But he actually has at least four different Pokemon to pull from that are canon to the game, and then a couple other from the manga. So Fearow, Raichu, Eevee, and Rapidash are all canon Pokemon that he is said to own in the games, or at least some stage of them. With the Rapidash being the one that he tells you that long story about in, I believe, Gold and Silver. And after you hear the entire tale, he gives you a rare candy. And also, because he had the Raichu and the Rapidash, I want his Eevee to evolve into Vaporeon. Alakazam, admittedly, I don't feel like it fits the rest of his aesthetic all that well, but it is one of the only canon Pokemon he actually owns in the manga. So I wanted it to go here. Maybe something like a Wigglytuff would fit well, better with the rest of the team, but it's one of his canon Pokemon from the manga, so um, it can go here. And then Sandslash, I did kind of have to pull this one in from nowhere, but I do feel like it fit the aesthetic that, Sandshrew, Pikachu, Eevee. I feel like they all are kind of in that like cute, round, like, you know, they all kind of have the same vibe. Bayoba, the owner of the Safari Zone. So naturally, I went with a bunch of Pokemon found exclusively in the Gen 1 Safari Zone. Those being Kangaskhan, Rhydon, Tauros, Scyther, Exeggutor, Dragonite. Now, this is that instance where I originally wasn't sure if I wanted him to have Dragonite. I didn't feel like he was important enough to have one since Lance also has one, but you can only find Dratini in the Safari Zone. And in the anime as shown here, he clearly has a Dratini, so he, I felt like he could have a Dragonite. This is also just, I think, a really, really good Gen 1 team. Like, this is like, throw a starter on there, or not even. Like, you can make a very solid, uh, you know, full team just from uh, Safari's on Pokemon. That's not even including something like a Chansey or a Pinsir. Um, so yeah, and these are all Pokemon that are exclusively found there. There are other Pokemon like Venomoth, Golduck, Parasect. There are both Nidos that I could have put on here, but these are all Pokemon that are exclusive to Safari Zone. Next up, Primo. Primo is actually a very interesting character where he first showed up in Leaf Green Fire Red. At some point, the player is given this little device called a Teachy TV, where Primo will essentially have different shows that are intended to show new players very basic ideas, like what status conditions do, how to catch Pokemon, like that kind of thing. And then he showed up again in Heart Gold Soul Silver, where his first appearance is in the Violet City Pokemon Center, where based on a code you tell him, he will give you one of three eggs that evolve into that hatch into a Mareep, a Wooper, or a Slugma, and then he'll also compete in the Pokeathlon. So I thought it'd be fun if I gave him two different teams, one if he stayed in Kanto, and then one if he were in Johto. So his Kanto team is full of a bunch of Pokemon that are showcased in his Teachy TV episodes. He uses a Rattata in the catching tutorial one. He uses a Butterfree and Poliwag in the status condition one to show that sleep helps with your capture chance. And I thought it would make sense for that Poliwag to evolve into Poliwrath. And then during that, he catches a Jigglypuff to evolve into Wigglytuff. Admittedly, that one doesn't fit his aesthetic very well, but these are canon Pokemon he literally captured or owned at one point. And then Machamp and Rhydon, he uses in the Pokeathlon in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Sensor Generation 1 Pokemon. I thought they should go here. And speaking of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I thought it'd make perfect sense for him to have the three fully evolved Pokemon of the eggs he gives you, Ampharos, Quagsire, Magcargo, and then switching out Poliwrath for Granbull. Admittedly, I think Poliwrath does fit him very well, but there is another character in that like either owns or hosts whatever the Pokeathlon that also has a polygraph. So either he gave them to him or it's on loan or he just doesn't use it anymore and instead is Gramble. But Gramble does fit him well also, so I like that here. Kurt, the guy that ha makes all of those absolutely terrible Pokeballs. It was a fun idea. I just wish one of them was any good. Like the fastball is like kind of okay, but again, a fun idea. I kind of wish they would mess around with even more new ideas for Pokeballs. They kind of haven't had any new ones since really Generation 4. Maybe there's been one or two new ones I can't think of, but Generation 4 was the last time they really, really tried to revamp like what different kinds of Pokeballs there were. And I kind of wish they would do that more, but regardless, um, I Kurt is actually the trainer that my brother and I were first theory crafting. This was like over 2 years ago. He just randomly posited, "Hey, what would Kurt have if you were to battle him in some post game fight in Gold and Silver?" So I thought it was a fun idea to make that team, and the team I created here is kind of an amalgamation of both of our ideas put together. So what we essentially landed on is it would be cool if first his ace is obviously Slowking. He cares so much about the Slowpoke and Slowpoke well. It makes sense that he would have one evolve it into Slowking. And then the other five Pokemon, we decided it would be kind of fun if they were all specifically Pokemon found from headbutt trees. His whole thing is crafting apricorns into Pokeballs, and those are found in trees. So I just feel like that connection just made sense to us. So Apom, I'm not doing Ambipom. This is specifically if you fought in Gold and Silver. The mostly is because I detest the design of Ambipom, so I don't want it to be here. Apom, Fortress, Noctowl, Executor, Heracross. I believe that's all of the ones found exclusively in headbutt trees. Obviously, Noctowl can be found other places, but uh, there might be one or two others that could be found, but these are the five that definitely fit him the best, and then Slowking. However, this is going to be one of those instances where I later did think, yeah, there is one Pokemon in a future game that fits him so well it just has to be here. That being Hisuian Electrode. It makes absolutely no sense for him to actually have one, but because he literally crafts Pokeball like you do in Legends Arceus, it makes sense for me personally to feel like he should have a Hisuian Electrode. Next up, the Daycare Man. So I originally created this team with the intent of it being like a catch-all for all the different daycare couples for every single game, and I wanted to use a fully evolved Pokemon of a bunch of different baby Pokemon. But then I did a little more digging and remembered that in Pokemon Crystal, the daycare main, once you get there, he gives you the odd egg. And that odd egg has the ability to hatch into one of any of the seven baby Pokemon introduced in Generation 2. And they all have the hidden ability or the egg move, Dizzy Punch. So I think it makes sense for his team to be full of six of those fully evolved Pokemon that have baby Pokemon. So those being Raichu, Wigglytuff, Hitmontop, Magbar, Electabuzz, the Jinx. Now, in this instance specifically, generally I have the Pokemon in the sixth spot where Jinx is. I usually have that be their ace. But in this specific instance, I think Magmar, Electabuzz, and Jinx should kind of all be kind of co-aces, similar to Blue in Gold and Silver, where his Exeggutor, Gyarados, and Arcanine are all level 58 together as his ace. I think those three should be his. They could even all be the same level, but at least those three are all on the same level as his strongest. Um, so yeah, I really like this team a lot. However, I then later realized maybe he should have a Ditto as well. Um, this, like I said, I'm not really going to care about synergy all that much, but this does make it that he no longer has two electric types. Theoretically, obviously, Ditto could turn into an electric type, but um, just on the team, it wouldn't be two electric types. But also, it just makes sense for him to have a Ditto that could then breed with all the other Pokemon that could, create the egg he gave you. So I think that's I think that's cool. Next up, Mr. Game, a English version of Heart Gold and Soul Silver exclusive character. In the Japanese version of Heart Gold Soul Silver, the game corners in those games are just normal game corners, like every other Pokemon game prior to it. It's the slot machines, everything. But in the English versions, they decided to remove all like traditional gambling, instead just have this guy here with the Voltorb flip table, making it a lot more tedious to actually get coins. But I still think the idea of him, being the head of this gambling facility was a cool idea for, to make a team with. So I essentially created his team full of six Pokemon that all had one-hit KO moves. The Gambler trainer class in the Let's Go games uses stuff like Doug Trio and Sea King, and they only know Fissure and Horndrill, whatever. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of extrapolate that into a full team with Sea King knowing Horndrill, Kingler knowing Guillotine. Lapras actually holds the record for the most possible one hit KO moves it can learn. It can learn Sheer Cold by level up, and then through Egg Move or other means, it can learn Horn Drill and Fissure. Doug Trio can learn Fissure, Pinsir, Guillotine, and then Rhyperior can learn either Horn Drill or Fissure as well. Maybe Lapras should be his ace since it can learn more, but I don't know. Since he's specifically a Heart Gold and Soul Silver trainer, in this specific instance, I think it's fine for him to evolve into a Gen 4 fully evolved Pokemon like Rhyperior, since he was never in Gold and Silver. This is specifically a post-game rematch in or post-game fight in Heart Gold Soul Silver. So I created this team, and then afterwards I was like, he is sitting at Voltorb Flip. That is the game he created. So he should probably have an Electrode. So I switched out Sea King for Electrode. Um, And I still think this does kind of thematically fit. Using explosion is still kind of a gamble. Like you sacrifice a lot to hopefully, get big results. I think it still fits with this theme. And you still have five other Pokemon that do use one hit KO moves. Next up, we have Mr. Briney. The guy with the Wingull who takes you to Dewford in uh in in Ruby Sapphire Emerald. Now, his was a little tricky because he actually had a lot of canon material to work with, especially in the manga. Obviously, he has his Wingull, which would become a Pelipper, and then a bunch of other water types that he just has in the manga. But I was workshopping this with my brother, and he pointed out that Mr. Briney is a captain of the sea, and not all the Pokemon that he had in the manga are specifically sea-dwelling Pokemon. Like Barboach is found exclusively in ponds and rivers in the region. None are found in the sea. So, so my final list is there's one exception to this, but the final list I came up with is all Pokemon that are specifically found on um like ocean routes. So we have Gyarados, Huntail, Tentacruel, Wailord, and then his Pico Pelipper. I do have Slacking here. If this was a heart pick, I just feel like it fits his vibe very well, and also his little hut is positioned just west of the normal gym leader who has Slacking as his ace. I just feel like they would be friends, and then just south of Petalburg Woods, which is where you can first find Slackoth. So all that together, it just makes a lot of sense for him to have Slacking. You could throw something like a Lantern or a Gorbis on here if you really feel like it doesn't really fit here, but I personally think that this worked for him. Next up, Mr. Backlot. Um, this is a character that He's the owner of the Poke Mansion. That's Maison, whatever, right below the Heart Home City in Diamond Pearl Platinum. He's also the owner of the Trophy Garden that's right behind that building. So I thought it would be fun if his entire team is specifically filled with Pokemon that are special encounters in the Trophy Garden. Um, Normally the Trophy Garden is full of a bunch of kind of boring Pokemon like Staravia, Kricketune, I think Pikachu, but like that's the only like unique one to that area. And then on certain days of the week, I think you have to beat the post game, at least in Diamond and Pearl, to get these. On certain days of the week, there are special Pokemon that can pop up. So his team is full of those kinds of Pokemon. Uh, Bonsly can be there, so Sudowoodo, Mime Jr., so Mr. Mime, Happiny, which evolves into Blissey, Azurill, which is a Azumarill, Porygon, going to Porygon Z, and then Eevee, which evolves into Leafeon. I wanted him to have one of the Gen 4 evolutions, so I went with Leafeon. Next up, we have the Digging Duo. Those two brothers that are in the wild area in Sword and Shield. Um, there was no official art for these people, so I just put two pictures of the hiker class from Sword and Shield. I don't know why they look like that, but that's what they look like. So, I made two different teams, one for the skill brother and one for the stamina brother, but I did kind of mirror them in ways that make sense, which we'll get to in just a second. So their team is full of four Pokemon that can learn Dig by level up, and then the two of the fossils. So Dugtrio, Flygon, Sandaconda can all learn Dig by level up, and then a bug type that can also learn Dig, this one being Vikavolt. And then I wanted him to have Arctozolt and Dracovish, which all together make up all four of the fossils that they can dig up for you. And then for the Stamina Brother, Escadrill, Krookodile, Hippowdon, which I didn't know Hippowdon can learn Dig now, but like it apparently can. Ninjas can also learn Dig, and then Arctovish and Dracozolt. I just think these teams together like parallel very well. Dugtrio and Escadrill are both like just the very concept of Dig incarnate. I like the idea of one having Flygon, one having Crocodile. They're both just very strong third stage, draconic looking ground types. And Hippowdon and Sandaconda both have the ability, literally have the ability to set up the sand. So I think their teams parallel very nicely. And then lastly, we have the ball guy. This, along with Kurt, uh, I made both of them first and then was like, well, I want to like showcase these teams somewhere. So I made a bunch more and presented them to you here. Um, yeah, same with Kurt. Me and my brother made his team like probably 2 years ago at this point, and I'm very proud of this team a lot. So let's get right into it. Now, Electrode, this is the only instance where this Pokemon is found nowhere in the Pokedex they come from. Outside of Kurt, where I literally took one from the future, which didn't even exist when Gen 4 came out. Electrode, um, for some reason, isn't in the Sword and Shield Pokedex, period. It's not in the base games, it's not in the DLC, it's nowhere. But Ball Guy would have one. He would just inexplicably have one. I feel it in my bones that like that he should have six of these if I'm being completely honest, but he has at least one Electrode. Next up, Amogus for the same reason he has Electrode. It literally looks like a Pokeball. Eldegoss is another round Pokemon that I feel he would have. Same with Dubwool, it's at least from this generation, but actually same with Eldegoss. Uh, Another, very round Pokemon that I feel like makes sense he would have. I went with Gigantamax Cinderace because he's sitting on a giant ball, and I think a ball guy would love that. And then Boltund, not only does Yamper have the ability ball fetch, which I think ball guy would like. Boltund is also essentially the mascot of the Galar Pokemon League. and Ball Guy is the literal mascot of the Pokemon League. So I think they pair well together. Okay, thanks for watching. Please let me know if you liked this video. Let me know if you feel like there are any NPCs that you would like me to, if you feel like I missed, you'd like me to do in a future video. Because there were a bunch of other ones I looked at but didn't really feel confident enough or creative enough to make it at this time. But, you know, if I get enough suggestions in the comments of ones that you really want me to do, then I'd be very happy to continue this kind of video, this more conceptual. This isn't really a change. It's more similar to my if every protagonist had their own team, it's more based on that where like there was some to go off of, but a lot of it had to kind of, I had to really be creative in order to make this. And I really like this kind of video. It's it's very fun to do stuff like the judging the rivals and gym leaders and all those. Um, but it's also fun to just, create these teams just out of nowhere, be completely creative with it. So let me know if you liked this style of video, any suggestions for the future, any, even outside of just other NPCs, other kinds of videos you would like me to do in the future. And with all that, I will see you all next time.